The young waitress gently slid the plate of pancakes toward the boy, whispering, "Same as always, honey. No charge." She never asked his name, never expected anything in return. But that morning, the entire neighborhood froze as four gleaming black SUVs pulled up outside the diner. A man in a military dress uniform stepped out, holding a carefully folded letter in his hand. Who were they? And why did everyone suddenly stand when that woman walked out? Welcome to QH. Let's uncover what really happened. Jenny Millers was 29 years old, a waitress at Rosie's Diner, a small establishment tucked between a hardware store and a laundromat in rural Kansas. Her life followed the same routine each day: wake before dawn, walk 3 blocks to work, tie her faded blue apron around her waist, and greet the morning regulars with a smile that never revealed the loneliness behind it. She lived alone in a 1-bedroom apartment above the pharmacy, her only family photographs turned yellowed by time. Her father had passed when she was 15, her mother 2 years later. The aunt who raised her had moved to Arizona for her arthritis, leaving Jenny with little more than holiday phone calls and occasional letters. On a Tuesday in early October, Jenny first noticed the boy. He couldn't have been older than 10, small for his age, with careful eyes that seemed to take in everything while revealing nothing. He sat in the corner booth farthest from the door, a backpack too large for his frame propped beside him, and a book always open on the table. The first time, he ordered only a glass of water. Jenny brought it with a smile and a paper straw. He thanked her with a nod so slight it was barely perceptible. The second day, the same. The third, the fourth. By the second week, Jenny had observed his pattern. He would arrive at 7:15, precisely 45 minutes before school began, at the elementary 3 blocks away. He would sit, read, sip his water slowly, watching as other customers ordered stacks of pancakes, eggs, bacon, and toast. At 7:55, he would close his book, thank her, and leave, having eaten nothing. On the 15th day, Jenny accidentally brought him a plate of pancakes. "Oh, I'm sorry," she said, setting it down as if confused. "The kitchen made an extra. I'll just leave it here instead of throwing it away." The boy looked up, suspicion and hunger battling in his eyes. "It's okay," Jenny reassured him. "Sometimes the cook gets the orders mixed up. Better to eat it than waste it, right?" She walked away before he could protest, watching from behind the counter as he hesitantly picked up the fork. When she returned 10 minutes later, the plate was empty, and the boy's eyes remained fixed on his book, a deliberate avoidance that broke her heart a little. "Thank you," he whispered as she collected the plate. It became their unspoken ritual. Each morning, Jenny would bring the mistaken order or the extra batch the cook made: pancakes one day, scrambled eggs and toast the next, oatmeal with brown sugar when the mornings grew colder. The boy never asked for anything, never initiated conversation beyond a quiet thank you, but he ate every bite, sometimes so quickly it seemed he feared the food might disappear. "Who's that kid you keep serving?" Harold, a retired postal worker who occupied the same stool every morning, asked one day. "Never seen his parents." "Don't know," Jenny admitted, "but he's hungry." Kathy, who worked the grill, cornered Jenny in the back after the 3rd week. "You're feeding a stray," she said, not unkindly but with the pragmatism of someone who had seen good intentions backfire. "You give handouts, they never learn gratitude. He'll just disappear one day. They always do." Jenny didn't argue. She simply shrugged and said, "It's fine. I used to be that hungry too." It was the most personal information she'd shared with her coworkers in the 3 years she'd worked at Rosie's. The boy never volunteered his name, and Jenny never asked. Something in his demeanor, the careful way he entered and exited, how he angled himself to see both the door and the window, told her that questions would only drive him away. Instead, she made sure his water glass stayed full, that the pancakes were always warm, and that the diner felt like a place where he could breathe easier for 40 minutes each morning. Sometimes when the diner was quiet and the boy was absorbed in his book, Jenny would allow herself to wonder, was he living nearby? Did he have family? Why was he always alone? And why did hunger seem like a familiar companion to him? But she pushed the thoughts away. In her experience, kindness with conditions wasn't kindness at all. So she continued their silent arrangement, watching as the boy's shoulders gradually lowered from their perpetually defensive hunch, as his eyes began to meet hers for a second longer, each time she approached his table. That small change, the moment of eye contact that stretched from a millisecond to perhaps two, was enough to convince Jenny that whatever she was doing, however small it might be, mattered. By the 6th week, others had noticed Jenny's routine with the boy. Most said nothing, but some couldn't resist commenting, their observations laced with the particular cruelty of those who have forgotten what it means to need help. "Playing charity worker on company time?" asked a businessman who frequented the diner, his tone suggesting he found the entire arrangement distasteful. "Kids these days expect handouts everywhere." "Times must be changing," remarked another regular. "In my day, no one gave away free food just because someone looked sad." Jenny heard these comments but let them slide off her like rain from a window pane. She'd learned early that defending kindness often hardened the hearts of those who criticized it. However, Mark, the diner's manager, wasn't so easily ignored. He called Jenny into the small office behind the kitchen one morning, his expression serious beneath his perpetually sweaty brow. "I've been watching you with that kid," he said, fingers tapping against the laminate desk. "Can't have employees giving away free meals. It's bad for business and sets a precedent." Jenny twisted her apron in her hands. "I understand. I'll cover the cost myself." Mark's eyebrows shot up. "From your tips? Those barely cover your rent." "It's my choice," Jenny replied, something resolute in her voice that made Mark study her more carefully. "Just one meal a day. I can manage." After a moment, Mark sighed. "Fine. But if it affects your work or if that kid causes any trouble, it stops immediately. Understand?" Jenny nodded, relief washing over her. She'd anticipated being reprimanded, perhaps even fired, but this compromise she could live with. Each morning she set aside a portion of her tips, money that might have gone toward a new winter coat or the dentist appointment she'd been postponing, and paid for the boy's breakfast. On a particularly cold Thursday in November, the boy didn't show up. Jenny found herself checking the door every few minutes, an uneasy feeling settling in her stomach. She prepared his usual plate of pancakes anyway, setting it at his empty booth, just in case. "Waste of food," Kathy muttered as she passed by, shaking her head. By closing time, the untouched plate had become a silent rebuke. Jenny wrapped the cold pancakes and took them home, unable to simply throw them away. The boy didn't appear the next day either, or the next. A week passed with no sign of him, and Jenny began to wonder if Kathy had been right. Had he simply moved on, as strays often did? The thought left her with a hollow ache she couldn't quite explain. She'd known nothing about him, not his name, not his story. Yet his absence felt significant, a small light extinguished. "Told you," Kathy said on the 10th day of his absence, not unkindly but with the assurance of someone whose pessimism had once again been validated. "They never stick around once the free ride ends." During this period, Jenny noticed a customer taking photos of the empty booth, where she still occasionally left a meal, just in case. The next day, she discovered why. A local Facebook group had shared the images with a mocking caption, "Rosie's Diner now serving imaginary charity cases?" The comments were even worse. "Publicity stunt. Bet they'll claim the food goes to underprivileged children while throwing it away. Feeding strays just creates dependency. That waitress needs a reality check. Next time a strange kid approaches you, remember this. You're being set up for something." Jenny had never considered herself particularly vulnerable to others' opinions, but the cruelty of these comments stung. That night, alone in her apartment, she questioned her actions for the first time. Was she foolish to help someone without knowing anything about them? Was she projecting her own past onto a situation she didn't understand? Seeking comfort, she opened the small wooden box where she kept her most precious possessions. Inside lay a faded photograph of her father in his army medic uniform, his smile gentle despite the harsh desert backdrop. Beside it was the small leather journal he'd carried through his service, the pages worn from frequent handling. Jenny opened it to a dog-eared page, reading the words she knew by heart. Shared a half ration with a local boy today. Johnson said I was crazy, that he'd probably report our position to hostels. Maybe, but the look in his eyes when he ate, same as mine when Mom would save me the last piece of bread during the hard times. No one grows poorer by sharing half a loaf, but those who forget to share remain hungry their whole lives. Jenny traced her finger over her father's handwriting, a sudden clarity washing over her. She didn't need to know the boy's name or story to recognize hunger. And hunger, whether physical or emotional, asked for bread, not questions. Nobody knew the boy's name. Nobody remembered the face of the person who helped. But each morning, someone wasn't hungry anymore. If you still believe small acts can change someone's life, please type HOPE. On the morning of the boy's 23rd absence, Jenny arrived at the diner with diminished expectations. The habit of looking toward the door at 7:15 remained, but the sharp anticipation had dulled to a quiet resignation. Still, she prepared a small plate of pancakes just in case, and placed it at his usual booth. At 9:17 a.m., everything changed. The first sign was the sudden quiet that fell over the usually bustling diner. Jenny, refilling coffee at a booth near the window, glanced up to see 4 black SUVs with government plates pulling into the small parking lot. They moved with choreographed precision, forming a semicircle in front of the entrance. Customers stopped mid-conversation, forks paused halfway to mouths. Outside, pedestrians slowed to stare as uniformed men emerged from the vehicles, standing at attention beside each door. From the lead SUV stepped a man whose bearing commanded attention before his uniform did. Tall, with the weathered face of someone who had seen too much sun and too little peace, he wore the dress uniform of a high-ranking military officer, his chest adorned with rows of ribbons and medals that caught the morning light. He scanned the diner's facade before walking purposefully toward the entrance, flanked by 2 younger officers. The bell above the door chimed as they entered, the sound unusually loud in the expectant silence. Mark emerged from the back office, straightening his tie nervously. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" he asked, his voice higher than usual. The senior officer removed his cap. "I'm looking for someone who works here, a woman named Jenny." The diner became so quiet Jenny could hear the soft hum of the refrigerator behind the counter. All eyes turned toward her as she stepped forward, coffee pot still in hand. "I'm Jenny," she said, trying to keep her voice steady despite the sudden dryness in her throat. The officer's stern expression softened slightly. "Jenny Millers?" She nodded, setting down the pot before her trembling hands could betray her anxiety. "My name is Colonel David Reeves, United States Army Special Forces Command." He reached into his breast pocket and withdrew an envelope, crisp and official looking. "I'm here because of a promise made to one of my men." He extended the envelope toward her. "This is a letter from the Commanding General of Special Forces Operations, and I have a personal message as well, from Adam's father." "Adam," Jenny repeated, the name unfamiliar, yet somehow significant. "The boy you've been feeding for the past several months," Colonel Reeves explained. "Adam Thompson, his father was Master Sergeant James Thompson, one of the finest soldiers under my command." Was. The past tense landed like a physical weight on Jenny's shoulders. "I don't understand," she said, still not taking the envelope. "Is Adam okay?" "He's safe," the colonel assured her. "He's with his grandparents now in Colorado, but for almost 3 months he came here every morning before school, after his father was deployed on a classified operation." The pieces began falling into place for Jenny. The boy's solitude, his careful watchfulness, the hunger that seemed deeper than physical need. What Sergeant Thompson didn't know, the colonel continued, was that his wife had left shortly after his deployment, abandoning Adam. The boy was too proud, too afraid of being taken from his home, to tell anyone. He managed alone, using the small emergency fund his father had left, making meals stretch beyond imagination. A collective murmur of shock rippled through the diner. Jenny felt her heart constricting as she imagined Adam, now with a name, with a story, trying to survive alone, waiting for a father who would never return. "Sergeant Thompson fell in Afghanistan 2 months ago," Colonel Reeves said, his voice professional but not without emotion. In his final letter, he wrote that if anything happened to him, we should thank the woman named Jenny at the diner who fed Adam without asking questions. He opened the envelope, removing a handwritten note on faded paper. He wrote, "If I don't make it back, please find the person who has been giving my son breakfast." Adam mentioned her in his letters to me. He said she never asked why he was alone or made him feel ashamed. She just fed him, day after day, expecting nothing. Tell her she didn't just feed a hungry child. She preserved the dignity of a soldier's son. Jenny accepted the letter with trembling hands, tears blurring her vision. The colonel's voice seemed to come from far away as he continued. The letter was read at Sergeant Thompson's memorial service. When Adam finally told us about you, the entire Special Forces community made it our mission to find you and thank you in person. What you did, his voice caught briefly, what you did for the child of one of our own, without even knowing who he was, that means something to all of us. The diner had fallen completely silent. Even those who had mocked Jenny's actions sat motionless, faces reflecting shock and in some cases shame. Colonel Reeves straightened to his full height, snapped to attention, and rendered a formal salute, a gesture of profound respect rarely given to civilians. Behind him, every military person present did the same. On behalf of the United States Army Special Forces, the brothers in arms of Master Sergeant Thompson, and most importantly, on behalf of Adam, thank you. Jenny stood frozen, overwhelmed by the knowledge that her simple acts of kindness, pancakes and eggs, a glass of milk, a smile without questions, had meant so much to a boy living through unimaginable circumstances, to a father fighting his last battles far from home. "I didn't know," she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just couldn't let him go hungry." The colonel nodded. "Sometimes that's enough, Ms. Millers. Sometimes feeding a hungry child without asking why they're hungry is the greatest kindness of all." As if on cue, every military person in the room and every soldier standing outside by the vehicles saluted in perfect unison. The customers in the diner, moved by the ceremony unfolding before them, rose to their feet in silent respect. Jenny, the quiet waitress who had lived nearly invisibly for years, stood in the center of it all, clutching a father's last thank you in her hands. A woman whose small, daily kindness had preserved not just a child's well-being, but a soldier's honor and peace of mind in his final days. The week following the colonel's visit transformed Rosie's diner in ways no one could have predicted. The story spread through town like wildfire, jumping from conversation to social media to the local newspaper. The same Facebook group that had mocked Jenny's charity case now shared a heartfelt retelling of Master Sergeant Thompson's letter, gathering thousands of shares in support of comments. Regular customers began requesting Jenny's section specifically. They left generous tips with notes of appreciation. "Thank you for reminding us what matters. And my son is in the Navy. Your kindness gives me hope." Mark Urey, who had initially grudged Jenny's free pancakes, hung a small American flag beside the booth where Adam had sat. Beneath it, he placed a discreet plaque, "Reserved for those who serve and the families who wait." The booth was never empty again, occupied by veterans, active duty personnel passing through town, and occasionally by families clearly struggling, but treated with quiet dignity by the staff. On the 7th day after the colonel's visit, a manila envelope arrived addressed to Jenny. Inside was a handwritten letter on lined notebook paper, the carefully formed letters betraying the youth of its author. "Dear Ms. Jenny, I didn't know your name until that day the colonel came to find you. But every morning for those months, you were the only person who looked at me like I wasn't invisible or broken. Dad always told me that real heroes don't wear capes, they wear the uniform. But I think sometimes they wear aprons too. When Dad stopped writing, I thought the world had forgotten both of us. But you remembered me every day, even when I couldn't tell you why I was alone. Grandma and Grandpa are nice. They're teaching me to fish, and Grandma makes good cookies. But I miss Dad, and sometimes I miss your pancakes too. Thank you for not asking questions when I couldn't answer them. Your friend, Adam Thompson. P.S. I finished the book I was reading. It had a happy ending after all." Jenny framed the letter and hung it behind the counter, Not prominently, not for show, but as a personal reminder of why small kindnesses matter. When customers asked about it, she would simply smile and say, "Just a thank you note from a special customer." Word of the diner's connection to special forces spread throughout military communities. Soldiers passing through town made detours to visit, often leaving unit coins or patches as tokens of appreciation. These too found their place on a small bulletin board behind the counter, a growing collage of gratitude from around the world. 3 months after the colonel's visit, a school group came to the diner for lunch after a field trip. An 8-year-old girl with curious eyes studied Jenny as she refilled water glasses. "My dad says you're a hero," the child announced matter-of-factly. "Do you feel like one?" Jenny smiled, kneeling to meet the girl's gaze. "No, sweetheart. I'm just someone who knows what it feels like to be hungry." "Not just for food," the girl's teacher added quietly, having overheard the exchange. Jenny looked up, meeting the woman's understanding gaze with a nod. The teacher was right. Hunger came in many forms. Food was only the most obvious. As summer approached, the diner hosted a fundraiser for military families, raising enough to establish a small emergency fund for children of deployed parents. Mark, surprisingly, matched the donations personally, admitting to Jenny that her quiet persistence had changed something in him. "Never understood why my father was so adamant about feeding every stray kid in the neighborhood," he confessed. "Drove my mother crazy, but I think I get it now. Sometimes a meal is more than food." On a quiet Tuesday morning, almost exactly a year after Adam had first walked into the diner, Jenny arrived for her shift to find something small and metallic on her usual station. A challenge coin, the special token carried by military personnel, usually given only to those within their units, lay beside her order pad. One side bore the insignia of the Special Forces. The other had been custom engraved, Semper Memor, always remembering. Jenny looked around the empty diner, searching for whoever might have left it. Finding no one, she stepped outside, scanning the street as the early morning breeze gently stirred the American flag hanging above the entrance. No unusual cars were parked nearby. No waiting messengers. Just the town waking up, sprinklers ticking on lawns, and the distant sound of the school bus making its first rounds. She slipped the coin into her pocket, its weight a comforting reminder that kindness, offered without expectation, sometimes returns in unexpected ways. That evening, as she hung her apron before heading home, Jenny noticed Mark placing a new sign in the diner's window. Simple but elegant, it read, "Whoever you are, whatever you can pay, no one leaves hungry." When he caught her watching, he shrugged self-consciously. New policy. Figured it was time. Jenny smiled, understanding the unspoken acknowledgement in his gesture. No grand speeches, no public declarations, just a quiet commitment to see the hunger in others and respond with what was needed most. Food without judgment, kindness without questions. As she walked home in the fading light, the challenge coin a solid presence in her pocket. Jenny thought about Adam, now growing up with his grandparents in Colorado, carrying his father's memory, and perhaps, she hoped, the knowledge that even in one's darkest moments, kindness exists in unexpected places. Not everyone who helps needs recognition. Some people just need to know that today, someone isn't hungry. And that alone is enough to change a life. You might forget this story in a few days. But if nobody retells it, history will remain silent forever. Subscribe to Incredible Stories, where justice, kindness, and memory are protected until the end.